We might be a little sparse this morning or a little smaller this morning, but we've got a number of people working in the fellowship hall, and I didn't broadcast what this class was going to be over this morning, so I don't know why. Anyways, this morning we're continuing our series over the creatures of habit stuff, and we've been looking at. Actually, I'll just tell you what we're doing right now. This morning we're looking at the habit of complaining. And I promise I did not, and then the sermon is over in Mark. It's Mark 2:18 through 22, where Jesus is questioned, why do the disciples of John and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And so you see the contrast in that text, in that passage, between fasting and feasting. And it's just ironic that today we're having our fellowship potluck for Miss Regina, and so it's like today we're just going to start off with don't complain, fast, and then we're actually going to talk about feasting, and then we're going to feast, right? So it's I didn't plan that out. I promise you, until it was mentioned this morning, I was like, why are these subjects together? But it just kind of worked out that way. I'm going to say the Lord works in mysterious ways. But this morning we're looking at complaining, and we've been talking about how we're going to address some things that end up breaking us. We may not see them as habits specifically, but these are habits, and these are things that we still need to die to. And so we need to see their importance. And then we're going to replace them with something that's godly and something that's better for us. And so it's almost like we're emptying ourselves of this so that we can be filled with something different. And so we talked about what it means to water stuff down. And if we water our lifestyles down and our habits down and our call to the gospel down, then so will our young people, right? And that's important that we continue to hold fast and stay strong so that they can become built up in the faith too. And then this is just kind of a summary of all the things that we've talked about in different order and in sequences. We've talked about anger, we've talked about pride, we've talked about worry, we've talked about lust and excuses and cynicism and everything. And we're going to use that glass half full or glass half empty, whichever one you are. We're going to use that again this morning for complaining. And so today we're looking at this. I want to ask you, what's the worst complaint that you've ever heard? That's not my job. Okay.
Not my place.
Not my place? Joe?
The worst complaint I've ever heard is trying to get the air conditioning and the heating set for a congregation of women.
All right, Joe went there. Oh, okay. Not this place. Not you, ladies. Not.
I think he's just trying to clean it up.
Okay, but trying to get the air conditioning just right or the heat just right for every single person who, of all different shapes and sizes and even different genders, right? It's challenging. Do what?
Forget it.
Forgetting?
It will never happen.
Yeah, forget it. It won't happen. Yeah.
I have a friend that says she's not complaining, she's just explaining.
Yeah, explaining by exclaiming. Yeah. Anything else? What else do you I mean, when you hear somebody say this or they complain about that, it just makes your skin crawl because it's just like, ugh. Why would you even say that? Just getting it off your chest? Okay, so maybe someone excuses something. I think about our first world complaints. I think about that, like, and it's not like, oh, I have no one around me. That's a human thing, because you can be lonely in any culture, in any demographic, in any background, or any income level. You can be, loneliness is not necessarily, that's like the universal thing. But I think about like, just this, I don't have diamond shoes or, but like, oh, my diamond shoes are too tight. Oh, you first world people, right? Those are, and while we think of air conditioning as a or as a necessity, it technically is a luxury, right? And so, the air conditioning too. Something that I would probably complain about is that it's a first world problem is, like when I first started coming in, filling in last summer, again, Joe, this goes back to your air conditioning. I would walk out and my hands would be frostbitten. The rest of my body would be fine, but my hands would be frostbitten after teaching and preaching. And it's like, man, why can't we just meet somewhere in the middle? But I saw this also in public schools, especially at Conway. In the summertime, it was like, let's just make it an igloo. Make it an igloo in this building. And so you walk in there, and if you're in shorts and a t-shirt like everyone else is in summer months, or in August and September, you end up walking outside for relief, right? And so I would probably maybe complain about how cold it is or how hot it is, but it's really, if you can change the temperature, then why are we complaining about something? This is first world problems. All right. Now, this is not asking you to tell me your complaints, but when are you most prone to complaining?
When you're upset,
When you're upset? Why would you be upset, Marty? Because you got a problem. Things are not going your way. Yeah. You don't want to do it to start with, if it's a job or something. Okay, trying to make it all about you. Tired.
Work too hard.
You work too hard. Okay. Maybe that goes back into tired.
that's the worst thing. They don't pay you enough.
Okay, they don't pay me enough. Yeah, I guess you can go find a different job. Maybe you feel entitled. Maybe that's what it is. I'm not pointing at you saying you're entitled, but maybe if you're making that complaint or saying that you feel entitled. I think I'm most prone to complain when I am tired. What did I put on here? I'm tired or exhausted. Maybe I'm frustrated, and maybe I'm like Marty, I'm not getting my way with something. Most prone to complain. There's something underlying that has to be dealt with, because the complaint is the verbal outage, but there's something deep within that we have to deal with. I want to begin with a funny story here, so listen up. One Sunday morning, this was back in the 1700s, John Wesley had finished preaching, and a lady walked up to John Wesley and said, "Brother Wesley, are you open to some criticism?" Wesley replied, "Well, I guess so. What would you like to criticize?" And she replied, "The ribbons on your tie, they're entirely too long and inappropriate for a man of God to wear." The woman at that point took out her own pair of scissors and cut off part of his tie. There were people standing around in the perimeter visiting. Everyone close by was shocked to witness this go on. But the story doesn't stop there. Wesley, realizing that his tie had been cut in half, then calmly asked her, "Ma'am, may I borrow those scissors for a moment?" She handed him the scissors, and he said, "Ma'am, are you open to some criticism?" She said, "Well, I guess I suppose so." And John Wesley replied, "Well, good. Would you please stick out your tongue?" The more that we complain, the more we cut ties, and eventually our tongues. Paul Molitor said that complaining is like vomiting. You feel better after you get it out, but you make everybody else around you sick. Is anybody like, if you see someone else vomit, you start to get queasy and sick and everything? I'm just not that queasy, but I maybe I get queasy, but I'm not like, oh, I need to do that too. But yeah, that chain reaction does happen. It's a legitimate thing. Will Bowen said this. He said, "Complaining is like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of somebody else's mouth, but not when it comes out of your own." All right. Vomiting and bad breath. Those are the images I want you to take with you. Next time you think you need to complain, oh, that's like vomiting. That's like bad breath. Some great reminders for us is that chronic complainers. They come in all shapes, all sizes, all ages, both genders, all nationalities. A complaining spirit shows no partiality. You know, just because you come from a certain background, or you maybe you look a certain way, or just because you're a man or a woman or a man, it does not mean that you are more or less prone to complaining. Sometimes we associate things with a nationality or a background or a stereotype or a specific gender. I've heard men complain about women just as much as I've heard women complain about men. It does not matter your gender. It does not matter. It matters about your spirit and your soul and your decision making, right? It has nothing to do with how you may be seen or even your DNA. They come in all shapes and sizes, and a complaining spirit shows no partiality. And so we need to be aware of this. This is almost like a great equalizer for all of us, no matter where we come from or no matter where we're going. It shows no partiality. So now I want to ask you again. Let's say a waiter brought a glass of water, this glass of water, to someone who is a complainer. What would the chronic complainer say after getting this glass of water? It's half empty, right? Okay, that kind of going in with the pessimist. What else?
Why did you bring me a half glass of water?
Yeah. Why'd you bring me a half glass of water?
You knew I was thirsty. You can read my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, you can read my mind. Any other thoughts? That waitress was so rude. Okay. And this may tread over into cynicism, where we assume the worst in other people, or we assume the negative in other people, and so you kind of see complaining and cynicism almost overlapping a little bit, where you're almost kind of fault finding, and you're seeing the worst in other people. A chronic complainer, I just kind of have this on the screen again. You know, an optimist would see this glass is half full. A pessimist would see that this glass is half empty. But a complainer, oh, that glass, it's slightly chipped with a smudge on the rim. That water isn't cold enough, probably because it's tap water. You know, I asked for bottled water, which means it's not very clean, and now I'm going to get sick. Lord, why me? You see where we've gotten off a little bit into complaining world? There's a smudge on there. Oh, it's not clean. Oh, they don't do this. Oh, and it's all of a sudden we've gotten down this track of complaining. Now you look at this. I just kind of came up. I mean, you can't really see if there's a smudge on it or not. But if you're a complainer, you're looking for the smudge. You're looking for the thing to complain about, right? Now I want to make a disclaimer. There's a difference between healthy, solution-oriented venting and complaining. Before we move forward, we need to understand this. You know, there's nothing wrong with healthy venting, solution-oriented problem solving, because we don't need to hold on to all these things all the time. We don't need these to infiltrate our heart all the time. And as we involve ourselves with others, they're going to get on our nerves, and that's normal. That's just natural. But we need to let these things out of our systems, and that's really what counseling's good for, is healthy venting, solution-oriented problem solving. At least as I've been through counseling, it's been helpful for me in that regard. At the same time, though, how I go about voicing the things that bother me, how I go about voicing those things, it does matter. And it matters to God a lot more than you might assume. And so when we're voicing or venting something that's weighing on us, we need to ask ourselves these questions. Why does this bother me? And what solution am I looking for? If I can answer those two questions, then that's probably getting me on a good track to say, you know, I'm not really complaining. I'm trying to find a solution to this, right? And so asking yourself those questions and almost interrogating yourself, why is this bothering me so much? What am I really looking to solve here? There's a difference between the two. Now, here's what Scripture reveals about complaining. Not venting, not voicing, not proper counseling, not solution-oriented problem solving, but complaining, okay? Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 3, from the very beginning, complaining has been around. Adam was the first complainer. Remember in Genesis 3, God's created heavens and the earth, everything, formed everything, taken what was void and formless and formed it and filled it. And so he's created Adam and Eve, and they're in the Garden of Eden. The serpent slithers up and tempts Adam and Eve right there together, but Eve is kind of in the front of the show. And so they eat the forbidden fruit. I don't know if it was an apple or not. I don't know if they had belly buttons or not, but you know what? They ate it. And so then they clothe themselves in fig leaves and they hide away in shame. And the Lord comes and tries to find them. And the Lord God called to the man and said to him, Adam, where are you? And he said, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And God said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? And the man said, well, the woman you gave me, she gave me the fruit of the tree, and I ate. And the Lord then went to the woman and said, what is this that you've done? And the woman said, well, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. God comes onto the scene to find Adam and Eve. The Lord asks Adam some questions, and Adam not only blames God, but you can also say that Adam was kind of complaining to God about who God provided for him and what God provided for him. And it's almost like, I'm not taking responsibility here, but I'm going to acknowledge where this could have been prevented. Let me say that again. I'm not going to take responsibility for this, but I will acknowledge where things went wrong. Right? How often do we do this? We're going to sit back and avoid jumping in and getting involved and taking responsibility, but we'll point the fingers and say, well, they could have done that better, or that could have been done better, or this is not great, this is terrible. We have an Adam complex here, a complaining complex here, where we sit back, we avoid responsibility, we blame other people, and we complain about how it's being done, instead of just jumping in and helping out, right? You might think, though, when you talk about complaining, you think about the Israelites in Exodus. Now, remember, this Exodus 16, what chapter does God deliver them through the Red Sea? Anyone know? Exodus 14. 2 chapters after their baptism. 2 chapters after their deliverance from Egypt. 2 chapters after they're on the shores of the Red Sea and they see Moses wave his serpent or his staff, and the waters come back and they crush the Egyptians and destroy all the Egyptians that were pursuing them. It's 2 chapters after that significant moment. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month when they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel, the whole congregation, not isolated few, the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to Moses and Aaron, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Not 2 chapters after the Red Sea, the Israelites are found saying these things. We would have rather died in Egypt. We want to go back to Egypt. We would rather be there than here. We like the food over there than we did here. You've brought us out into no man's land to kill us. Come on, we're starving over here. We're tired of the chicken minis. You don't care about us. You just want to kill us. Now, how often when we complain, we often don't just complain about something, but we also blame and accuse that person we're complaining about. You know, it's one thing to acknowledge a preference you have or even a discomfort, but it's a whole other thing to attack and dismantle someone else's character and integrity and even their intentions. And that's what the Israelites are doing. It's like they're looking at Moses and Aaron and saying, we're uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable. We hate this. We want to go back. And then you're also putting blame on them, saying, you brought us out here to die in the wilderness. And because of that complaint, you start to blame. There's a problem there. A big problem. When you take on a complaining spirit, your perspective often gets skewed. Your heart is hardened, just like Pharaoh's was, just like Israel's was. Now, if you would, turn in your Bibles to Numbers chapter 11. I want to read this a little more in detail. There's too much to put on the screen. I figured it'd just be good for us to read out of the actual physical copy of the Bible. Numbers chapter 11. Chapter 11, verse 1. And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes, and when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them, and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, "Oh, that we had meat to eat! We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic." Man, they really liked their garlic. "But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at." Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like that of bdellium. The people went about and gathered it and ground it in hand mills or beat it in the mortars and boiled it in pots and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you dealt ill with your servant, and why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth? That you should say to me, 'Carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing child, to the land that you swore to give their fathers.' Where am I to get meat to give to all this people? For they weep before me and say, 'Give us meat that we may eat.' I am not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, kill me at once, if I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness." Man. Then the Lord said to Moses in verse 16, "Gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting. Let them take their stand there with you, and I will come down and talk with you there. And I will take some of my spirit that is on you, and I'll put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, 'Consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, for you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, Who will give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. Therefore, the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not eat just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you. Because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, Why did we come out of Egypt?' But Moses said, The people among whom I am number 600,000 on foot, and you have said, I will give them meat that they may eat a whole month. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them and be enough for them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them and be enough for them?" And the Lord said to Moses, "Is the Lord's hand shortened? Now you shall see whether my word will come true for you or not." So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders' people and placed them around the tent. And the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took some of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. And as soon as the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not continue doing it. Now 2 men remained in the camp, one Eldad and the other Medad. I'm going to name my kids that someday, Eldad and Medad. That's kind of funny. And the Spirit rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent. And so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, "Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp." Joshua the son of Nun, there's a reference to Joshua, the future commander of the Lord's army, the assistant of Moses in his youth, said, "My Lord Moses, stop them." But Moses said to them, "Are you jealous for my sake? Would all that the Lord people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit on them." And Moses and the elders of Israel returned to the camp. So, okay, that's a lot of stuff, a lot of information. But you basically see the track of all of this. The Israelites complain, and they grumble, and they grumble, and they grumble. We're tired of these chicken minis. We're tired of this manna. We're tired of this manna. We want meat. And you notice what Moses said. He approaches God, and he almost, I don't know that I don't really want to say that Moses is complaining. Israel is definitely complaining, but Moses is acknowledging, as the leader of these 600,000 people on foot, these complaints are weighing on him way too much, and he's coming to God in such a way that's like, God, I can't handle this. I'm not big enough to carry all of these complaints and the weight of all these things, right? And so I don't know that Moses is complaining, but he might be, but he might just be venting and voicing something to God and trying to find a solution to it, right? So there is a little bit of a contrast between the Israelites specifically and Moses and how he's handling it. Now I want you to think about this. What had God done for the Israelites up to this point? He had delivered Israel from oppressive Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt, and think about slavery, what that means. Someone else is your master who doesn't they don't give a lick about you, right? Delivered Israel from oppressive Egypt, back-breaking labor, delivered them. And he destroyed the oppressors in the Red Sea. I mean, they're on the shores of the Red Sea, and in Exodus 14, the Bible says that they were standing on the shores as they saw Moses wave the staff and the waters come through and whoosh, completely destroy Pharaoh and all the Egyptian army. They saw that God had destroyed them. And God dwelt with his people into the wilderness. He led them into the wilderness. He went by the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, the cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night. Dwelt with his people. He provided for their needs daily. I get it. Eating the same thing over and over daily is kind of monotonous, and it can get loathsome at some point. But their needs are still taken care of. And he had reminded them about his presence and his power. And they're still nagging and nagging and nagging and complaining and complaining and complaining. You got something, Kelly?
We're a lot like them. We have short memories. We forget the blessing that he's laid upon us each day. Because today's another day. What we'll do for me today. I think about them and think, they'd rather be slaves. Really? They'd rather go out and get the straw and stuff to make the bricks. Everybody has to work.
Mm-hmm.
They've not got all this short memory.
Yep. What's interesting for me is even with, kind of like with that point, today we are often not as aware of God's providence, or like, how is God really providing for me? And it's possibly because we're complaining. Complaining can distort our view of God's work in our lives, and it skews our perspective, it hardens our heart, and it often will disrupt good fellowship. But complaining also frustrates God. It weighs on church leadership too, just like Moses and Aaron. Today, you can come talk to anyone in leadership. You are more than welcome to voice something to elders, deacons, and me alike. But it's not always wise to do so. Complaining can really kill a church culture very quickly. If everyone is always weighed down with complaints, you want to kill a church culture? Complain about it. And constantly do it, and backbite, and X, Y, and Z. Sometimes ministers burn out because of their own choices. Sometimes elders and deacons step down because of their own way of life, and maybe they've had different issues and problems, but a lot of times people run amok and, get stuck because they can't take the complaining. Complaints will destroy a church's culture very quickly. It has real tangible consequences too. Now, there's someone greater than all of our complaints. Thank goodness. Praise the Lord for that. We must point to Jesus every passage, every class, every sermon, and preach the gospel every single time. Now, the marvelous thing, when you think about Jesus and complaining, you really didn't hear any complaining. I'm grateful for that. The marvelous thing about Jesus is that he didn't complain as he went to the cross for you and me. Like a lamb, he was led to the slaughter, and he was silent. There was no deceit found in his mouth. And Jesus had every right to complain about this great sacrifice. Oh, this crown of thorns is killing me. I can't carry this cross. It's too heavy. It's splintering me. I shouldn't have to bear this alone. I didn't do any of these sins. Why should I have to die on a cross for all these sins that I've never committed? But praise the Lord that Jesus didn't complain about going to that cross for you and me. The Hebrew writer says this in Hebrews 12, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. Let us look to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. Who for the joy that was set before him, Jesus willingly went there and went through all of that with joy, for the sake of joy, and didn't complain about it. For you and me, beloved. It's in the absence of complaining, the presence of agape love, that we find the blessing of the gospel. Willingly. He loved you and me enough to endure all kinds of hardship, all kinds of torture, all kinds of splintering and suffering and suffocating so that you could be redeemed and restored. Will you let this impact you? Will this put our first world problems into perspective? I wonder. Now remember, let's not just stop a behavior. Let's not just try to, I just can't complain. Let's not do that. Let's also replace it with something else. So here's some solutions for complaining. First one is, as Proverbs says, guard your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. But however, James says in James chapter 3, no man can tame the tongue. You complain with your tongue, right? If you just never spoke, you probably wouldn't complain, but you'd probably be thinking about it in your head, like, oh, they shouldn't really be doing that, or that's not straight, or that's not this way, this should be this way. James says in James 3, no man can tame the tongue. That tongue in your mouth, it's a restless evil full of deadly poison set on fire by hell. However, at the same time, I see an apparent contradiction here, because while James says no man can tame the tongue, there's nothing you can do about it. It's a restless evil full of deadly poison set on fire by hell. Jesus says in the gospel accounts that truly, truly I say to you, everyone will be liable for every careless word they say on the day of judgment. So how can James give you an impossibility over here? No man can tame the tongue, but yet Jesus says you'll be held accountable for every careless word you say on the day of judgment. That's kind of concerning, isn't it? That seems to be an apparent contradiction. However, if you zoom out just a little bit more, you'll see that, Jesus also says this, it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, it's what comes out of the man that defiles him, right? And you can control what goes into your heart. Proverbs says that. Guard your heart, for from it flow the springs of life. So putting all of that together, we can't fully tame our tongues, even when it comes to complaining in daily life, maybe so. However, what we can do is guard our hearts and filter what actually resonates and resembles in our hearts. If you put in garbage into your heart, garbage is going to come out, right? If you're around people who complain all the time, you're always looking to complain and resonating in your heart with complaints, and you're probably going to have a complaining spirit. But if you control that heart, you can almost kind of grab a hold of that tongue indirectly. But if your heart is not in the right place, that tongue definitely will not be in the right place either. So guard your heart, take every thought captive, make it obey Christ, keep the garbage out of your heart, and instead let the word of Christ, as Paul says in Colossians, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, to which you were called in one body, and be thankful. So guard your heart. Someone has suggested as well, try a detox. Someone has suggested that you should try going a few weeks without complaining. You could wear a bracelet on your wrist, and every time that you complain, you could kind of start over your detox by switching arms, just seeing how long can you go without complaining. You ever tried that before? Anyone ever tried that before?
Recognize that you're complaining sometimes.
Maybe that's where you get accountability partners. I mean, treat this like an addiction. I mean, you can, because we kind of are addicted sometimes to complaining. You could try a detox. The point of the detox is, as we know, is to simply clean house, get rid of anything that causes you to complain. Now, maybe you can't change that annoying person. You can't change that circumstance. Okay. But you can get rid of that spirit of complaining, of nagging, of whining, and playing the victim. You can detox yourself of those things. Right? Another thing, less judgment, more gratitude. As we empty ourselves of a complaining spirit, we need to fill ourselves with something else. And as we empty ourselves of judgmental complaining, we can kind of try to fill ourselves with gratitude. And, instead of pointing out the things we're not pleased with, we can point out the things that we are. Sometimes we think that we're like almost hands tied behind our backs, and we have to point out the negative all the time. And maybe that's why the negative sticks out to us more. I don't know. But maybe we can actually, instead of pointing out everything that's negative all the time, maybe we can actually point out what is positive or what's godly or what's good. Paul says in Philippians 4, if anything's true, if anything's noble, if anything's honorable, if anything's worthy of praise, you think about these things. Meditate on those things. The God of peace will be with you. Maybe start a gratitude journal. And this doesn't have to be something huge. It doesn't have to be something that's scary. Just every day, write down 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for. See how it changes your life, right? Another thing, encourage one another. Positive affirmation goes a long way. There's negative affirmation, there's positive affirmation. Sometimes we need to use a little more positive affirmation. I'm not saying negative's not important. God uses negative affirmation all the time in Scripture. At the same time, though, we are called to be proactive, and when we complain, it's almost like we're taking a few steps back sometimes. But let's be positive sometimes. Encourage someone today. Instead of complaining, encourage someone today. If someone gets on your nerves, well, encourage them in a positive way. Maybe something that you do admire in them. Say something nice to them. Not trying to be fake, not trying to hide it, not trying to, present a false self or a fake reality. No, just be encouraging. Be genuine. Paul says this in Philippians 2, do all things without grumbling or disputing. Now that Greek word for all, guess what that means? All, yes, everything. It means all. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Beloved, if people in this world are full of complaining and they come in our midst and all we do is complain, how are they going to see Jesus? This is our identity, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, salt and light. Salt in a bland world, light in a dark world. And if they come in our midst and they can't see anything beyond our complaints, how are they going to see Jesus? How are we going to persuade them for the sake of the gospel if all we're doing is full of complaints? I'll leave you with this thought and maybe some discussion. If you have enough time to complain about something, then you also have the same amount of time to be content and grateful about something too. What will you do? Do all things without grumbling or disputing, so that you may be blameless and innocent in this perverse and crooked and twisted generation, whom you shine as lights in this world. All right, this is Creatures of Habit. Anybody got any complaints?
Should be okay today.
All right. No complaining about those finger foods.
Now, next Sunday's a different story.
Yeah, next Sunday, yeah.
We'll start complaining again.
Well, I tell you, I know how to get Marty fired up, is if you move that Lord's Supper table and it's an inch off from being centered. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments, ideas?
It's just interesting that the first complaint was over hunger when Adam ate the apple. I guess you can relate that to hunger. I mean, he ate it, so it's eating. The Israelites eating, and nobody ever said hunger. That's why they complain so much. But when you've got kids, that's the number one complaint. I'm hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that. Like, we were hungry, well, I don't want that. I'm not hungry enough. So, and even
Yeah.
we talk about as adults, we get hangry or hangricidal. The hungrier we get, the meaner we get. So that just goes to more complaining.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like
Get
I have
hangry.
a lot of people complain to me about a lot of different things, but you can always tell the ones that are looking for a solution,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that just like to complain about everything. I mean, the ones that, I probably handle the ones different that come to me looking for a solution to a problem than I do the ones that just are complaining about a problem and either don't have a solution or don't want a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Some people complain they being hung with a nylon rope.
Say that again?
I said, some people would complain they were being hung with a nylon rope.
Yeah.
That you can get hung before it goes back.
I think that's the first time I've heard that, Joe. Anybody else? Is that the first time you've heard that? No. I'm trying to think of another funny example of complaining.
One of the things we did at one of the jobs I had as a manager, it was like we weren't really had issues, but they could turn into complaints easily. And so when we got to the room, they told us, all right, list them, but for every complaint or issue, 2 solutions, or don't list it.
Mm.
And so that was a process for us to go through and think about, okay, this was something we had that didn't work, or so instead of complaining about it, what am I going to do to fix it? And that just changed the whole project of the meeting okay, now we're talking about solutions and not just problems. Because if you go through and just talk about problems and you don't have solutions, you didn't solve anything. You just lowered the morale of everybody.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's just kind of, this is a little pet peeve of mine as I'm growing and developing and preaching and teaching and things, and I'm studying this and looking more how to communicate effectively and things. Something that I've realized is every time someone stands before the congregation of God's people, you must preach the gospel every single time. You must preach Jesus from every single text, every single time. Otherwise, what are you gathered for? Something that I guess this may border on a complaint, but here's the solution that I've come to. You had a lot of people. There's still people out there that are, you would consider hellfire and brimstone, beating on the pew or beating on the pulpit and just hellfire and brimstone approaches. Somewhat legalistic and everything, and we love them. I don't agree with them in that approach necessarily, but it's almost like you probably resonate and remember the speakers or the preachers that always focused on the hell, but really never focused on the heaven, right? We focused on what we need to turn away from, but we didn't always focus on the hope that we have and what we're turning towards, right? And so while I love those people and I'm doing my best to love them, even years removed from their preaching, it's almost like in the same way complaining is almost like preaching about and talking about the fires of hell, but never talking about the glories of heaven. It's always talking about the sin, but never talking about the Savior from sin, right? And so it's almost like you're stewing and brewing in this fiery place, but there's never a solution to it. And if you hang out in there, you're no different than a hellfire and brimstone person who always preaches about that, but never preaches about the salvation and the grace and the gospel. Joe, you got something?
Yeah, I just like to tell folks, I don't know if I can stand it if you got any better. Which is just like saying, hey, I am blessed. I am blessed. I feel blessed. It's an attitude you can have or go back the other way.
Mm-hmm.
I had an aunt that used to, she put on social media, she called it attitude of gratitude.
Mhm.
And she would list things that most people would see complaints. And she would put a positive spin on it, like, you know, I couldn't hear the preacher in church because of the baby that was crying next to me. She would say attitude of gratitude. I am thankful for the crying babies in church because they are the future of the church.
Mhm. Attitude of gratitude. May we not complain about any babies crying in here. They are the future of this church.
We should be very thankful we have air conditioning too.
Yeah, we do need to. Even if my hands are really, really feel like ice blocks, I am grateful for air conditioning. I'm even grateful for this warm weather. Even though it can get sweltering, you get sweaty pretty easily, I'm still grateful for it. Because I can walk outside and I can spend more time outside, and there's just benefits to it. The trade-off is sweat, and that's okay. I don't know. Any other thoughts? Things you want to complain about before we close this?
Replace the complaints with praying about it.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's not something that you can't, there's nothing wrong with calling a spade, but again, like I've said before, you can play the spade card, but if you don't play the heart card, the love card, speaking truth in love, what are we doing? Right? All right, I'm going to go and dismiss us. We're done.